Hey y'all, it's K-Bird Tweets, and this is Peace, Love, and Baseball. It is Arizona Diamondbacks week here at Peace, Love, and Baseball, and we always go straight to a source, a well-trusted source to get you into the culture of the team that we are covering. And this week, we are joined by Dalton Feely, who is an Arizona Diamondbacks fan. He is also the head researcher for John Boy Media's Talkin' Baseball podcast, so you may know him from that, but a well-documented Diamondbacks fan. So Dalton, thank you so much for joining me today. How's it going?
I'm doing good. Kelsey, thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to talk some snakes. Got to represent always.
Yeah.
So I'm ready to go. I'm pumped up.
Well, Dalton, before we get into the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks, we've got to get into the history of Dalton as a Diamondbacks fan. So tell me, you just told me that you are born and raised in New York City. How did you become a fan of the Arizona Diamondbacks?
Well, it's very funny because people always wonder that about me because I'm a New Yorker through and through, but I'm a Diamondback fan. It's like one of the weirdest teams, I guess, to root for, especially if you're a New Yorker. My first baseball memory, I was like 3 or 4 years old. It was a Diamondback-Yankee game, and I loved the purple and teal jerseys when I was young, but I was infatuated with Randy Johnson. You know, he's a 6'11" pitcher, left-handed, had the long hair. He throws 100 miles per hour. You can't, if as a left-handed batter, you're threatened of your life when you're at the plate. And he was kind of like, I don't want to say my idol, but like the first athlete I really enjoyed watching. And so
Okay, cool.
The shortened version is, you know, Randy Johnson was my guy, and it just developed into a Diamondback love.
That's awesome. I love that it was a player, like a personal tie that drew you in. So obviously now you have made a career out of covering baseball. Give us just a little bit of background, because I'm excited to obviously get your perspective as a Diamondbacks fan, but you have such a in-depth perspective of all of baseball that provides a unique perspective in itself on a specific team, because you really are immersed in all of baseball. And I think you'll be able to highlight things that maybe make the Diamondbacks unique in a way that maybe a fan who doesn't follow all of baseball as closely would be able to tell us about. So how did you get into being a baseball researcher and working in media covering baseball?
This is buckle up, get ready. This is one of the weirdest stories ever. So I worked in the football industry when I was in college, and right after college, when I was a student, I was a student manager. I was an assistant coach for wide receivers, recruiting, special teams at SUNY Cortland College in New York.
Yeah, okay.
Post-college, and my last couple of years in college, I was a stats and researcher for an outsourcing company for Fox and ESPN's NFL broadcast. So I'd work on Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night football, excuse me. And so I was doing that for like 5 years. And then my grandfather, I lived with my parents, my sister, my twin sister, my grandfather. My grandfather got sick, so I had to kind of just put sports on hold for a little bit, help take care of him with my family. And this was June of 2022. My friend Nicky Cass, he influencer in social media. He's an Italian comedy skits. If you see him, you know him basically. He's one of my good friends, and he reached out to me saying, do you want to play floorball with a group called John Boy Media? And I said, I don't know what floorball is, but I'm in. Basically played that with him. They liked Nick and I. They brought us back for another game in the JM Warehouse, their series where we play sports in warehouse. They liked us. They brought us back. We have our own franchise. And then lo and behold, they knew my background as a researcher from football. They're like, you know what? Let's bring this guy on. He knows baseball. He knows how to do research. It's a perfect marriage. And then I've been here officially since January 2023.
Amazing. That is very cool. Okay, it's a little bit more of a straight path than I anticipated from your initial introduction. But yeah, so the research background was strong, the baseball fandom was strong, and it just kind of like the perfect opportunity presented itself. That's very cool. Well, Dalton, I'm going to give us a little bit of background on one of MLB's younger franchises. The origin of the team is interesting because when you think back about Arizona and baseball, and it's like Arizona was kind of always a fixture of baseball. And actually the first time that there was an attempt to bring a major league team to Phoenix was in the 1980s because there was explosive growth since the end of World War II. It actually made Phoenix the 14th largest in the nation and over 2 million residents. And Phoenix proper had risen to the 9th largest city in the nation after being 99th just 30 years prior in 1950. So the exponential growth of the city itself and that area was just begging for more professional sports. And in the late 1980s, Martin Stone, who is the owner of the Phoenix Firebirds and the city's AAA minor league baseball team and top affiliate of the San Francisco Giants, he approached St. Louis Cardinals, the football team at the time, the owner Bill Bidwell, about sharing a proposed 70,000 seat dome stadium in Phoenix that would have been the centerpiece of a major plan to redevelop downtown Phoenix. Bidwell already had plans in the works to leave St. Louis. Instead of doing this like joint deal, he signed a long-term lease with the Arizona State University to use the Sun Devil Stadium as the home of its soon-to-be Arizona-based NFL franchise. So long story short, Stone's plan was a no-go without the now Arizona Cardinals on board as well. So in the fall of 1993, Jerry Colangelo, majority owner of the Phoenix Suns, the area's NBA franchise, announced that he was going to assemble an ownership group he named very cleverly the Arizona Baseball Inc. to apply for a Major League Baseball expansion team. Colangelo's bid received strong support from one of his friends. It's good to have friends in the right places, Chicago White Sox and Chicago Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf. And media reports say that the then acting commissioner of baseball and the Milwaukee Brewers founder Bud Selig was also very much in support of this bid. That's all according to the Arizona Star. So he had the right people on his side, whereas Martin Stone years earlier just didn't have those kind of connections. But as baseball fans know, Arizona has been a spring training site for baseball since 1946. So according to the Team Ownership History Project series by the SABR, many teams, most notably the Cubs and the Giants, had large followings in Arizona before the Diamondbacks came to be in 1998. So my question for you is, are most Diamondbacks fans converted fans from other like older franchises that were around? Or are they mostly Arizona sports fans? Or are they people like you who randomly got attached to a player because they did have a lot of stars, which we're going to talk about in the early years of the franchise as well?
Yeah, I really think it's generational based, like you were hinting at about the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks and organization, how they got there. I think fans, let's say 25 and younger, like right around the time when the Diamondbacks were created, I think they were fans of the Diamondbacks as their beginning, as their base of baseball knowledge. And they probably affiliate with all Arizona teams, whether it's the Suns, whether it's the Cardinals. I don't want to say the Coyotes now because of everything that's going on in the NHL, but usually Arizona teams. Whereas I think more of an older generation had an affiliation with another team outside of Arizona, and then they might have realized, oh, I can go to a baseball game and enjoy, that's 30 minutes away, 15 minutes away. I can go watch the Diamondbacks play right by me and don't have to worry about Eastern time or Western time, Mountain time, whatever it may be.
Yeah, because so I grew up in central Illinois, right in between Chicago and St. Louis. My dad is from St. Louis and my grandparents. So I am like a generational Cardinals fan.
Okay.
I will always be a St. Louis Cardinals fan, but I live 15 minutes away from Citizens Bank Park now. And I'm like, and the Phillies are like fun. And
Yeah.
everyone on my block is a Phillies fan. So I feel that like pull of like, obviously I'm always going to root for my team, like the Cardinals, if they're playing the Phillies, but the way that we're set up currently, like it's okay for me to be, a little excited for both. And I could see where that pull, like if you were a Cubs fan living in Arizona, where you would be like, am I a Diamondbacks fan now? And maybe eventually it just evolves that way. Like I'm not going to force it on, my potential future children to be Cardinals fans if they want to be Phillies fans. It just might happen that way. So it's always interesting to see how fandoms evolve, especially of these younger teams where like it sounds like you're a first generation Diamondbacks fan.
Yeah, my family are Yankee fans, and I grew up watching Yes Network too, watching all the Yankees games with my dad, and it's long and behold, I'm still a Diamondbacks fan.
I love it. I love that you have like such a personal tie to it, that you were drawn to it and you got to pick it. That's very unique and cool in itself.
My dad didn't twist my arm or anything. It's like you have to be a Yankee fan. Kind of like what you were saying with your future kids, like let them choose, and if they become the same fandom as me, great. If not, that's their own team.
Yeah, it's nice to kind of let your personality and just your own, personal whatever you're drawn to kind of dictate it for you. So the name, how the Diamondbacks were named, I always find this fascinating when we're talking about different teams. Colangelo's group was so certain that they would be awarded a franchise that they actually held a name the team contest for it before they even got approved for it. Very confident. I mean, he had Bud Selig in his back pocket, so what can you say? They took out a full-page ad in the sports section of the February 13th, 1995 edition of the state's leading newspaper, the Arizona Republic. According to the Diamondbacks official site on MLB.com, first prize was a pair of lifetime season tickets awarded to the person who submitted the winning entry. I would have been putting in all sorts of entries trying to win my way into that. But the winning choice was the Diamondbacks after the Western Diamondback, a rattlesnake native to the region known for injecting a large amount of venom when it strikes. So it is a pretty serious and threatening mascot. In addition to a write-in option, the 4 choices that were provided that did not win were the Arizona Coyotes, which we know now is another team has used, the Arizona Phoenix, the Arizona Rattlers, and the Scorpions. From the beginning, Colangelo wanted to market the Diamondbacks to a statewide fan base as to not limit the appeal to Phoenix and the suburbs. So he actually decided to call the teams the Arizona Diamondbacks rather than the Phoenix Diamondbacks. Did the best name win? I mean, I think Diamondbacks is probably my pick. Is there anything else that speaks to you there? The Rattlers, the Scorpions?
No, I think they went with the right choice. Arizona Rattlers, I believe, is a football team in Arizona. I don't know which league now. So it's kind of funny as you said with the Coyotes too. So those are 2 different names that didn't win for baseball that are still in Arizona for different sport leagues, which is kind of funny. The one thing I think with Diamondbacks is just kind of funny is that their shortened name, the D-backs, doesn't sound like the greatest sounding name. But when you say Arizona Diamondbacks, like that's got a nice ring to it. So yeah, I think it won.
Yeah, and the actual mascot itself is like badass. You can't argue with that, So I think it works.
Isn't it funny though that the mascot of the Diamondbacks is like it's a snake team, it's a bobcat.
Like that is weird, right? Okay, so there is no if you go to a game, there is no on-site snake.
No, it's a bobcat. Yeah,
interesting. I guess it would be harder to have a snake mascot since they don't walk. You
can't move like a snake, though. Yeah,
is that it? I'm not sure. We're gonna have to look deeper into this. But what I want to hear about now, Dalton, and I'm not sure how often you've been there since obviously you live pretty far away, but the stadium, they have a new retractable roof ballpark, Bank One Ballpark, which was opened in 1998. It was nicknamed the Bob, and it was renamed in 2005 to Chase Field. But it was built in the industrial warehouse district on the southeast edge of downtown Phoenix, which is also 1 block from where the Phoenix Suns play. Tell us about the Chase Field experience. What's it like out there in the desert to see some baseball?
It's so funny that we're talking about the stadium. I've only been there one time in my life. Well, yeah, one time in my life, and that was actually during the World Series in 2023. So my first time was during the World Series. You can't really beat that.
Yeah.
I've always dreamt about going to Arizona before the World Series, and when they were going on that run, I was like, you know what, this is my chance. Like I'm willing to pay whatever it is. You don't know how often you're going to see your team make a World Series, so take advantage while you can. But going back to the atmosphere, it's a very interesting stadium because it's not necessarily an outdoor venue. Like you don't have that feel until they have either the retractable roof open or the windows open in the outfield. When they played in the World Series, I was sitting the 300 levels, and the skyline of Phoenix was so beautiful. It was picture perfect. Game 3 might not have been the result that we wanted, but it was a fantastic view to watch a game of baseball. I can't wait to go back. Knock on wood, I'm going back in August. I'm curious the difference in how I feel about the venue for World Series versus regular season game, because obviously it was way packed in the World Series game.
Right.
So that also changes my view a little bit of the stadium compared to maybe a regular season game, but it was a great experience overall.
Well, let me ask you about this because this was a big point of contention, specifically in the playoffs. They have that really cool pool out in the outfield. And obviously when they win in a series at home in the playoffs, they all jumped into the pool. And there was this big conversation around should they let the Rangers celebrate in their pool? And I think someone from the St. Louis Cardinals previously had talked about them being kept out of the pool and it being a huge no-no. What do you think? Should they let So should they let opposing victories be celebrated in the pool, or should it be reserved for the Diamondbacks?
Like in theory, I want to say the Diamondbacks. It's our pool. Let us celebrate there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say if you don't want them to celebrate in your pool, win the game. And this is coming from a Diamondback guy. Win the game. You don't have to worry about anyone celebrating in your own pool.
That's real.
This was, I remember, I want to say it was 2013. I could be the wrong year. The Dodgers clinched the NL West title in Arizona, and they celebrated in the pool. And that was like the origin of why they don't let teams celebrate in the pool anymore, because the Dodgers celebrated and everyone was like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, I get it, but that's a very real take on it. I like your take on it, because overall it's fun regardless of which team is celebrating, and of course it's better for the majority of fans at the game if it is the Diamondbacks. But yeah, I think it's hard to keep any winning team out of a celebration opportunity like that. That's something that's very unique to Chase Field.
100%.
Well, on March 9th of 1995, Colangelo's group was officially awarded a franchise to begin play for the 1998 season. A $130 million franchise fee was paid to Major League Baseball. As we mentioned earlier, the Tampa Bay area was also granted a franchise, the Devil Rays, to be based in St. Petersburg. They're obviously now known just as the Tampa Bay Rays at the same time. Arizona had originally been intended to join Tampa Bay in the American League. I did not know this, but 5 American League teams had threatened to block the league assignments because of concerns that they would have additional games outside of their time zone, which is interesting, and it's a real concern, causing early starts that would decrease revenue and TV ratings. So the Diamondbacks were officially voted into the National League, while their expansion counterparts in Tampa Bay were voted into the American League, all because a certain amount of owners did not want to have more games on the West Coast. You are an East Coast Diamondbacks fan, as we mentioned. How do you keep up? Do you watch most of the games? Do you have a way that you like follow or catch up if you can't make it all night?
It's called a lack of sleep. That's how I usually get through it. I try to watch every game. I do a pretty good job on it, and I'm honest when I can watch it versus can't watch it. Like on Twitter, I'll say I can't watch the game tonight. I got to catch up with my sleep. I usually watch it's a 9:40 start. They usually finish, let's say 12:15, especially with the pitch clock. That has been huge for me.
Ooh, yeah.
That's been helping big time. But if I can't watch, usually if I'm going into the city, I'll watch the condensed game on my phone and kind of get like the recap of what happened that night.
Yeah. See, you can stay dedicated and still sleep some of the time.
I like watching the game live, so I could talk to Diamondback fans across either Arizona or the United States while we're all watching the game together, though we can't be together when doing so.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what is so fun about baseball Twitter. And I think that's actually how I came across your account originally, was that you live tweet and cover so much of the games, which is always super fun. Well, you mentioned also how the uniforms drove you to also kind of attached to the Diamondbacks from an early age. So according to the original press release from Colangelo's group, which actually was posted on the team website during the first few seasons, the chosen team colors were originally Arizona turquoise, copper, black, and purple. Turquoise was chosen because the greenish blue stone is indigenous to Arizona, copper because Arizona is one of the nation's top copper producing states, and purple because it has become a favorite color for Arizona sports fans thanks to the Phoenix Suns. Since then, the Diamondbacks uniforms have evolved a lot. They have like the Sedona red now, which I totally get, but what is your favorite Diamondbacks uniform and logo? Is it still that OG uniform?
Yeah, it's the vintage purple, teal, copper color vibe. If we were in a different division, I really do believe we would still be repping the purple and teal. Because NL, there's a lot of teams that are red in baseball, but it's ironic that the NL West, if you go back, was the only team that didn't have a red team. Giants are orange and black, Dodgers blue, Padres are brown and gold, Rockies are purple and gray, and then the Diamondbacks. And then I think new ownership wanted to change that scheme to stand out in the National League West.
That makes sense. I would have never thought about it that way. But yeah, I love when they wear the throwback uniforms and the teal hats that they have. That I think those just came out in the past like year or so that have like the red snake on them. Those are really sweet too. Yeah. I feel like I jumped on the Diamondbacks bandwagon last season, not just because they were super fun to watch, obviously in 2023, but because I realized like their swag is really cool too.
Oregon, we're the Oregon Ducks of baseball. Lots of uniforms.
Yeah, but I love it. It keeps it interesting. And I think
Mhm.
they're all relatively decent. There's not one that I'm like, they should just remove that from the rotation. I get it, you know? Well, in the earliest days, the Diamondbacks operated very much as a subsidiary of the Suns, who they shared ownership with. So several executives and managers with the Suns in the American West Arena were brought over to the Diamondbacks in similar roles. And the expansion draft had not yet taken place when they were already trying to put out the uniforms and get hype around the team. So there were no actual Diamondbacks players yet, but members of the Suns team, including team captain and three-time NBA All-Star point guard Kevin Johnson, who was actually drafted by the Oakland A's in 1986
Huh.
as a shortstop, but he chose to focus on basketball as for his pro career. Danny Ainge, who actually briefly played in the major leagues at the beginning of his career for the Toronto Blue Jays, and then Danny Manning and coach Paul Westphal joined Colangelo and modeled the first prototype Diamondbacks uniforms, which were designed by Campbell Fisher Ditko at a public event in November of 1995. And in November of 1995, they were modeled by these basketball players and then immediately put up for sale to the public. I had absolutely no idea, but what a good way to
Oh,
get it out
yeah.
there. I mean, professional athletes wear it and it looks cool, and everybody's going to have Diamondbacks merch years before they're even a team. In the early years, the Diamondbacks' first major league game was played against the Colorado Rockies on March 31st of 1998 at the Bob before a standing room only crowd of over 50,000 people. Tickets went on sale on January 10th. They sold out before lunch, and unfortunately, the Rockies did win the game 9-2 with Andy Bennis, who Cardinals fans will also remember on the mound for the Diamondbacks, and Travis Lee being the first Diamondbacks player to get a hit. He had a single in his first major league at bat ever, but he also became the first Diamondback to score, homer, and drive in a run in his second MLB plate appearance. In their first 5 seasons of existence, the Diamondbacks won 3 division titles in 99, 01, and 02, a National League pennant in 2001, and a World Series championship in 2001. In 1999, Arizona won 100 games in only its second season to win the NL West title. They ultimately lost to the New York Mets in 4 games in the DS in that season. Here's where baseball fans might start to recognize some names. Colangelo fired the team's first manager, Buck Showalter, who you might know. After a relatively disappointing 2000 season, he replaced him with Bob Brenly, who was the former Giants catcher and coach, who at this point, Bob Brenly had been working as a color analyst for the Diamondbacks on the television broadcast. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Dalton, where they like an analyst then becomes a coach, let alone a
It's
manager?
Yeah, it's so weird. I think I've seen that in football and baseball, football and basketball.
Okay.
Baseball, I that has to be the first instance, especially in the 2000s, like early 2000s.
Yeah,
Now, like this happened, like JJ Redick for basketball.
sure.
Urban Meyer did it for football, but baseball, I've never heard of that before. That has to be the first instance in professional sports. It's nuts.
Yeah. I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, and not saying that there aren't guys that do that might also be qualified for that, but for the most part, not so much. They're two very separate things. But
Absolutely, yeah, it's weird.
yeah, in 2001, the team was led by 2 of the most dominant pitchers in all of baseball, Randy Johnson, as you mentioned, and Curt Schilling. Arizona had postseason victories over the St. Louis Cardinals, 3-2 in the NLDS, and the Atlanta Braves, which they beat 4-1 in the NLCS. They advanced to the World Series, where they beat 3-time reigning champions, the New York Yankees, 4-3. They became the youngest expansion franchise to win the World Series in just their 4th season of play. That's pretty damn quick.
Mm-hmm.
And this was the first time since 1991 that the home team had won all 7 games of the World Series. The Diamondbacks were actually the first in the National League to do so. So there was a lot of unique things about that series. An estimated orderly crowd of over 300,000 celebrated at the Diamondbacks Victory Parade, which was held at Bank One Ballpark and the surrounding downtown Phoenix streets on November 7th of 2001. So you did mention Randy Johnson already, but who is it him? Tell us more about him, or maybe is there another player or two that is really notable in your Diamondbacks fandom?
It's funny. When I played baseball, I was a center fielder, and I love playing the outfield. So Steve Finley was someone that I always kind of looked up to too. And he was a guy who bounced around the NL West. I think he played for either 4 or the entire NL West, which is, I think, the only person to do that. And Steve Finley, I don't want to say he gets overshadowed by Gonzo because of how good Luis Gonzalez was in that 2001 season. He has 58 home runs. I think he's runner-up for MVP. But Steve Finley was a great player in his own right, and he really helped the Diamondbacks during his time there.
Very cool. Yeah, that's one that, like, if you're a bandwagon Diamondbacks fan or you're looking to get into the Diamondbacks, like, go back, look up Steve Finley, and get up to speed, because this franchise is just not that old, and it wasn't that long ago that all of these guys were the ones that were making the difference. And that brings us right to their first World Series title, which we already mentioned. But this was the first men's major professional sports championship for the state of Arizona, and the first for a team in the four major North American professional sports leagues for owner Colangelo, whose basketball, the Phoenix Suns, they made it to the NBA Finals just in 1976 and 1993, but they lost both times. The team finished the 2002 season with a 98-64 record. They won their third NL West title in 5 years, but they were ultimately swept out of the NLDS by the St. Louis Cardinals. Randy Johnson, however, was awarded his fourth consecutive Cy Young Award, as well as the Major League Baseball Triple Crown. Arizona ended the 2003 season with an 84-78 record in third place in the NL West. Isn't that funny? That's like the same record that they had last year. They were in third place in the NL West. But both Johnson and Schilling had suffered injuries during the season, and Schilling was traded off in the offseason to the Boston Red Sox, where he, of course, we know he contributed to that team's 2004 World Series victory. I don't really like to think about that one personally, but the Diamondbacks' early success as a franchise came at a high price. And this is so interesting because I was so not aware of this. The 2001 World Series winning team had an $84 million payroll, which these days seems like nothing, but it was a lot then. And $46 million of it was deferred. So to pay off their deferred salaries, the Diamondbacks raised ticket prices sharply, like over and over again in the early 2000s. And they eventually traded Schilling to the Boston Red Sox, as we mentioned, Johnson to the New York Yankees, which just had to be killer. And for prospects and for cash. And by the end of the 2004 season, the club owed more than $250 million in deferred salaries per azcentral.com. So deferred salaries were all the talk of this offseason. Not a new thing and not always a good idea. My question for you is, do you think it was worth it to build the excitement around a new team to get the World Series title? Because this is like a common critique of World Series teams, is that they're like built and then they're built to kind of crash and burn. But was it worth it, especially for a new team?
I think if you win, it's 1,000% worth it.
Yeah, easy
and
to say.
If you lose, right? It's not worth it at all. But it's funny when we're talking about the Diamondbacks, and they're like, I say their sister organization, the Rays, when they came in together, they took two totally different approaches when they came into the league. The Diamondbacks, Jerry Colangelo spent money. He was willing to spend it out and try and get a World Series for the Diamondbacks, a championship in Arizona. The Rays did not do that. They didn't. I don't think they had a winning season until like 2007-ish, 2008 maybe, when they went on their run. If you want to create this pride in your state, your town, your city for a new organization, the best thing you could do for your fans is to try and win games. So I mean, mind you, I'm looking at it 20 years later, but in my eyes, in that moment, I would love for them to take a chance at it and go for it.
I mean, I think you have the perfect perspective on it, though, because like we were saying, you don't necessarily remember that World Series as you were so young, but you're able to say like that didn't tarnish your experience growing up as a Diamondbacks fan to the point where you were like, oh man, I just wish, you didn't grow up hearing like, if Colangelo hadn't screwed us over all these years ago, like I could be enjoying baseball more now. So yeah, only 3 years after winning the World Series and 2 years after winning a third division title in 3 years, the Diamondbacks never recovered from a slow start. They ultimately finished 51-111, which was the worst record in baseball and is still the worst in franchise history to this day. After this season, Colangelo was actually forced to resign as managing general partner in the summer of 2004, so right towards the end of the season, and he ultimately sold his interest in the team. Did fans want owner Jerry Colangelo out after his spending put the team in a bad spot? Like, is this something that fans still talk about today, or has it just been forgotten because now there's a new owner to be mad at?
This was a topic, I think, even 10 years down the line, like in the early 2010s, this was still talked about.
Okay.
2011, they had a good run, and that was a really good year for the Diamondbacks. But between 2004, when he was kicked out and Colangelo was kicked out, to 2011, when they won, made their next playoff appearance, their big playoff appearance. I know 2007 too was a good year. It was mentioned like, man, this team has set back essentially a decade. Now at this point, I think it's all in the past. we now talk about Ken Kendrick. So that's for good or for worse.
Yeah.
But it definitely, there was an impact felt during, especially in the late 2000s with Colangelo and how he spent.
Okay, cool. So maybe if I talk to a fan like 10, definitely 20 years older than you, they might still have like a bad taste in their mouth about Colangelo. Okay.
It's a great first taste, and the aftertaste is not good.
Yeah. Well, and it's just so interesting to talk about because we see these owners like Steve Cohen, and even, I mean, the way that the Dodgers are doing it is very different, but them like spending, and that being so admired and fans getting really on board with that, but at what cost? And so this is a perfect example of the cost of it. And, are we going to see something similar happen to the Mets where like they didn't win when they went and did it? So yeah, like you said, if it works, it's worth it. And you never really know unless you try. So
exactly.
To some extent, I can't fault them for trying. But yeah, the next few years from 2004 to 2007, lots of changes. One of them was the original equal partner, Ken Kendrick, became managing partner. He brings in a new manager in Bob Melvin. So that's another name that baseball fans will be familiar with. This was his first Major League Baseball managing job. They brought in a new president, a new GM. They've got the new red uniforms. They're making all kinds of trades. By 2007, they were coined the new D-backs, and they found success with a young team, including Brandon Webb, Connor Jackson, Stephen Drew, Chad Tracy, Chris Young, Miguel Montero, Mark Reynolds, and Justin Upton, to name a few. They posted the best record in the NL with 90 wins and 72 losses, and their unorthodox style led them to adopting an unofficial motto that was coined by their first baseman, Tony Clark, quote, anybody, anytime. And yes, that is that Tony Clark, who is currently the executive director of the MLBPA. So the Diamondbacks made it back to the NLCS for the first time since 2001, and they were ultimately defeated in the CS by the Rockies. Remember when
they
the
got
Rockies
hot? They won like 22 of 23 games. It was horrendous. It was a 4-0 sweep.
Oof.
Yeah. That was a childhood memory. That was not fun.
So you remember, see, I wasn't following the West close enough at that point in my life to where like I remember when the Rockies were doing things like that. But
the Rockies, that September run was unbelievable. It was magic.
Well, I want to ask you this now, Dalton, because this is like a very kind of random, obscure question, but I think it tells us a lot about the franchise and like what you hold close about the franchise. So if you could pick one player who is currently in Major League Baseball, who is not on the Diamondbacks, that you think fits into the culture, like does not need to fit a current need for the team. I know that's hard because you're like constantly thinking, trade deadline's coming up. What do we need? But just strip all of that away. Just somebody like based on vibes alone who should be a Diamondback. Who would it be?
That's a great question. I love this. I might need like 5 seconds to think about this. Like,
yeah, take your time. Who should be a Snake? Because they got major vibes on that team. I mean, they definitely did last year, and they've carried over. They brought back Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who I think is definitely one of the like vibe leaders on that team.
Yeah, I'm going on, like, not based on skill, not based on position. I'm going based straight on vibes, right? Pure vibes.
Pure vibes.
I think Miggy Rojas from the Dodgers.
Oh yeah.
He's a known clubhouse leader, a well-respected guy. He's, dare I say, an older veteran now who's been in the league, I think, close to 10 years. And the Diamondbacks the last couple of years have had pieces like that, Evan Longoria being the most notable last season. Even this year, I know he hasn't been playing well, but Gino Suarez has kind of taken over that mentorship.
Yeah,
in the clubhouse a little bit. Beloved in the locker room. And I think Miggy Rojas would bring a very similar vibe to, pick up the younger guys. We're still a young team. I mean, I know we made the World Series last year, but
definitely
Alec Thomas, Jake McCarthy, Corbin Carroll, Blaze Alexander, who's not on the teams in AAA, but he's young. Geraldo Perdomo, Gabby Moreno, all these guys are in their mid-20s. So you need some veteran leadership. A guy like Miggy Rojas, I think he would fit perfectly in that clubhouse.
All right, so sit down, Jazz Chisholm. We want Miggy Rowe on the Diamondbacks. I love it. Well, there's not a ton to take note of from 2008 to 2010, other than many more organizational changes from a departing team president. They fired Bob Melvin. They hired AJ Hinch. They fired AJ Hinch, and so on. But in 2011, the Diamondbacks opened Salt River Fields at Talking Stick, which is their new spring training home in Scottsdale, to rave reviews. Very popular venue. Have you been there by any chance?
I have not, but I've heard a lot of good things on Twitter about it being one
Yeah,
of the best
same.
venues in sports. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got to get there in spring training sometime. The Diamondbacks share this complex with the Colorado Rockies. Now, the Diamondbacks ballpark Chase Field played host to the 2011 All-Star Game on July 12th of 2011, and this was highlighted by the first use of the designated hitter rule in a National League ballpark. After they had an explosive second half in 2011, they ended with a 94-68 record, 29 games up from 2010. This is something that I noticed right away because obviously a huge storyline from last year was, the sharp turn of the corner from just a couple years past, which we'll get to. But the Arizona Diamondbacks faced the Milwaukee Brewers in the 2011 National League Division Series. They lost 3-2 in the decisive game. 5 in 10 innings. So
Nyjer Morgan. Oh my gosh, Kelsey.
like giving you flashbacks.
Even worse in the Rocky series. It was game 5, winner take all, walk off. Oh.
Why is it those painful moments that just stick with us the hardest?
Always.
Well, 2012 to 2016, a big, if not unexpected, comeback, followed by years of falling into obscurity. My question for you now is, I guess, is this kind of becoming the Diamondbacks thing? Is this a thing? Am I noticing a trend that's kind of what happens? They, like, every time they have a big season, then they kind of crash and burn again?
It's like a 7-year gap. Yeah, it's kind of funny. And I hope history doesn't repeat itself unless we win. Where it's you have a playoff berth, whether it's 2007, 2011, 17, 23. Next year, you're kind of like mid, or next 2 years are kind of mid, and then you fall off hard like 3 or 4 years later. Hoping that's not the case now, but it has been a trend.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't look at the moves that they made in this offseason as them attempting or planning to trend that way. But this kind of brings me to my question about Ken Kendrick and the current ownership. What are the Diamondbacks fans' biggest critiques of the current ownership? Because every team kind of has their fan base, has their things that they, commiserate on. Is there anything specific that Diamondbacks fans are like regularly critical of Ken Kendrick about?
I think if you asked me this question going into the last season versus this season, my answer would change, because previously it had been kind of being willing to spend. And I don't want to use the term cheap, because I mean, I would, you're still spending millions of dollars, don't get me wrong. But in years past, they've made a couple of big splash moves, whether it was Bumgarner or Greinke being probably the two notable ones, where they would spend and those would backfire, and then they would get kind of shell-shocked and not want to spend as much money in free agency. So I think the biggest gripe back then was not willing to, not necessarily go all in, but willing to spend on multiple players to help benefit the right now team. Whereas now this offseason, we saw them re-sign Lourdes. They made a couple of moves, signing Monty, signing Erod. They went for it, and I give them full credit. So, and this is in 2024, it's the most money, their highest payroll in franchise history. So they're trying to build off the success they had in 2023. I still think the gripe is, even if you make a mistake spending money, willing to try again. Just use those resources in the right way. And that's not necessarily Ken Kendrick.
Right.
That's also the baseball operations staff. But I think not being afraid to spend money is my biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of franchises who are in that similar position where, like, they'll spend the money to get a player or two that will keep the seats full and kind of keep you attached and, like, hanging on for hope. But that there are puzzle pieces missing, that ultimately you're like, yeah, well, you could get lucky and get hot at the right time, which totally happened. So I guess I was glad and kind of pleasantly surprised to see them not just be satisfied with what they had, first of all. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was because they did not win, which we'll get to in 2023. But yeah, I'm glad to see them going for it. And we'll get to how that's working out for them so far. But in 2017, this marked the first playoff berth since 2011 and the first ever wild card berth for Arizona. They finished 93-69, winning 24 more games than the year prior. So as we mentioned here, they're climbing straight up again. They once again faced the division rival, the Colorado Rockies, in a thrilling wild card playoff, which resulted in an 11-8 win. They faced the Dodgers in the NLDS, where they were unfortunately swept, as you mentioned. by LA. But 2018 marked another winning season, 82-80, which was their first back-to-back winning season since 2007-2008. Unfortunately, at that time was not good enough to make the playoffs, finishing third in the NL West. Along with the rest of the world, 2020 brought dark times for the D-backs as they fell into last place in the NL West with a 25-35 record in the pandemic-shortened season. And in 2021, the Diamondbacks started 15-13, like, okay, pretty steady. But then they went on a 5-40 stretch over their next 45 games, including 2 10-plus game losing streaks. And this was a franchise record 17 losses in a row that plunged their record to 20-53. Did you see this coming? Like on paper, were they supposed to be this bad?
No, not that bad-ish, but not like that bad.
Yeah.
I could be getting my years wrong. So the stat might not be right, but I believe it was 2021. Mad Bum throws a complete game against Atlanta in a doubleheader. So it was the 7-inning rule still, where the doubleheaders were 7 innings. He does that, and the Diamondbacks don't win a road game for 2 months. I think it was like early April, and then they don't win a road game until like June or July. Nuts.
So rough. So you weren't like, oh, this team is just going to be abysmal. This is kind of what we signed up for. It was an extreme version of that.
I didn't. There was no aspirations for playoffs. Let's put it that way. But I didn't think nearly under 50 wins that year. No way.
Yeah, usually, I was talking to my friend John, who's a Cincinnati Reds fan, and one of the things that I had to ask him about when my Cardinals were playing so poorly last season was, how do you stay invested in your team when they're not playing so hot? And he was like, well, you know what? The thing is, like, even in a bad season, I usually get to see my team. I still get to see my team win like 60 games. That's a lot. But they didn't even do that this year. And we're so we're not far removed from this at all that it's crazy to think that this was just a few years ago. Like, this is where the Diamondbacks were at. They broke the MLB record for the most consecutive road losses in the modern era at 24 in a row, which also tied them for all time with the 1889 Louisville Colonels.
So it was that year.
They are. But yes, it was that year. You were right on.
Yeah, that was abysmal.
They ended with that 52 and 110 record. They were actually tied with the Baltimore Orioles, so they were not alone being the worst in baseball that year. And it was the second worst in Diamondbacks history. It was just one loss better than that 2004 season that we talked about earlier. But in the 2022 season, the team finished fourth in the NL West with a 74 and 88 record. Still a lot better than 52 and 110. Mm-hmm. But now, Dalton, we have made it to 2023. And the Snakes are alive. In 2023, the Diamondbacks finished 84 and 78 to record their first winning season since 2019. They also secured the third National League wildcard slot for their first postseason appearance since 2017. This season also included major hype and excitement around Corbin Carroll, who became the first rookie in Major League Baseball history to record 25 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a single season. The Diamondbacks beat the Milwaukee Brewers in a 2-game wildcard series. They became the fourth team in postseason history to win their first 2 postseason games with multi-run comebacks. So they were not only like this fun, young, vibey team that snuck into the playoffs, they also were like the comeback kids then on top of it. And they were having really exciting playoff games that people's eyes were on from the start. Did you, once they got into the playoffs, did you have a feeling? Did you think okay, this is the team that they just have the right vibes to run away with it? You're I want to say yes, but
yeah. Listen, there's the fan side of me and it's the baseball side of me. So my job, I watched the whole league and stats of the entire league. So I kind of knew what we're going up against. And to say I thought we would win for sure, that's not true. I had hope. The Milwaukee series, I thought that was a team that we can compete with. I know they had great pitching last year. Mm-hmm. But there was, I was a little worried about that team. You had Burns, you had Woodruff, potentially Wade Miley, who's my favorite Diamondback ever, who's now in the Brewers. But then the Dodgers. We always hear about the Dodgers, how great they are. They win the NL West every year. And if they beat us, oh my gosh, Kelsey, that would have been awful. Once they swept the Dodgers, we were playing with house money, and that's so bad to say. But it was fantastic. And then we come back down 3-2 against Philly and win 2 games on the road. It was one of the greatest underdog stories in baseball history, dare I say. It was a fantastic thing to ride. It just would have been sweeter if they won the entire thing. But
absolutely. Yeah. I feel like that was the story we all like wanted to read that ending to, the alternate ending, please. But
yes.
yeah, because I just especially once they beat the Phillies and they were like, it wasn't like they got lucky against the Phillies. Like they were beating the Phillies. And I got really sick of the narrative. And I mean, same with the Dodgers. Like they just were at that point in time a better built team. And I got really sick of the narrative of like, oh, they're just hot at the right time, or like they're skeezing by. It's like, no, they're not. Like these are competitive games. And I wish it hadn't played out in the World Series the way that it ultimately did, because they did get beat pretty quickly. But they had some other highlights along the way. So as you mentioned, they swept the Dodgers in 3 games to advance to the NLCS for the first time since 2007. They also became the first team in postseason history to hit 4 home runs in a single inning, which was just another highlight. Freaking blast. And they beat the heavily favored Philadelphia Phillies to win the NL pennant in 7 games. Ultimately, they did lose to the Texas Rangers 4-1 as the Rangers won their first ever World Series. So there was tons of highlights. We just mentioned a handful of them. What was your favorite part of the 2023 World Series run?
Oh, I mean, like you said, a lot of fun parts. I think my favorite part, this is going biased on like what I was doing during the time. For John Boy, we would do like playoff live streams. So we would stream some of the live streams, like we're watching the games, our reactions. And it was the Dodgers game versus former Cardinal Lance Lynn.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it was the 4 home run inning. I mean, when Gabby Moreno hits a foul ball that we thought was a home run, it was in the 4th one. I was like, no way. Literally the next pitch he hits for a home run. I went nuts. It was a semi-viral clip. It was me just yelling and dancing like a little kid, celebrating that we have this big lead against the Dodgers and Lance Lynn. That was definitely my favorite moment for sure.
That's awesome. That is the kind of moment that every baseball fan dreams of. So I'm sure that was so relatable and awesome that you were able to capture it like that. Well, Dalton, obviously, like you have stuck with this team through your whole childhood, even in being far away from them, not having a ton of people around you, like surrounded by other Diamondbacks fans. So what is it about the team that makes it like different from other franchises that no matter what kind of good baseball you're surrounded by, you always come back to the Diamondbacks?
It's definitely different. I'm surrounded by a lot of Yankee fans at work, my family. And it's so funny, the contrast of how we attack the offseason versus like the Yankees. Like there are certain teams in baseball that are going to spend or trade, and they will get the best assets possible to make their team formidable in the next season. And there are other teams that might not have that same approach or aren't able to spend as much or aren't willing to spend that much. And so I see teams spend so much money and go for it. And Diamondbacks, we kind of play a little small ball, a little smaller franchise in terms of spending and whatnot. But especially now, the type of baseball they play, it's lots of running, great defense. Even bunting has made a comeback. Geraldo Perdomo was the greatest bunter in baseball. Do I say it? I don't know exactly what it is. It's a mix of all these things: the way they play, who they are, how they market themselves. The Snakes are alive, and even though I'm far away from them, they're always close in my heart.
Yeah, I loved the embrace the chaos slogan too. Like everything surrounding that team was just spot on for like if you love the game of baseball, how do you not love the Arizona Diamondbacks, especially right now? Okay, what I want to ask you to leave our listeners with, because we do this series where we're covering all the teams because we have a lot of overseas listeners who are new fans to the game, but they may not even necessarily have a fandom that they have attached themselves to. So tell me like 2 players that are on the major league team right now that you're most excited about, and then maybe like 1 or 2 that are up and coming that we either haven't seen with a big league team or have only, had a cup of coffee here and there. Who are some players that are in the pipeline that we should keep our eye on?
I'll start with the major league level. I know he's had a really down year, but it's a chalk answer, but you have to. Corbin Carroll. His rookie season last year was one of the best rookie seasons in baseball history. It's been a rough 2024, but if everything's right, he is such an explosive and electric player to watch. And that's kind of someone you need on this team. He kind of is the poster child of what the Diamondbacks represent: speed, contact, hustle, fielding, all of that. And then if we're going to go for one batter, go for one pitcher. Zach Gallen's obviously the ace. He is the stopper. He will give you 6 shutout innings. But one person I want to watch in the bullpen, Justin Martinez, young pitcher. He throws 101, 102 straight heat. There was a nice little splitter, sinker kind of vibe. He's got a good breaking ball. He's a potential future closer in this league, and he could be a really good player. His repertoire is filthy. He's our 7th inning guy right now, but I think if Sewell doesn't come back at the end of the season, that Justin Martinez might be the future closer of the Diamondbacks.
Somebody from the bullpen is always a good person to kind of pick from obscurity and put in front of other baseball fans who aren't following the team as closely. Because if you get into the bullpen, then you're like, okay, if you know the bullpen guys, you know the guys to watch. That's how you can really get yourself immersed in a fandom. I like 100%. That one.
I'll give you my one prospect. He started this week. He made his MLB debut, and it didn't go super great. Christian Mena. We acquired him this offseason. We, as in Diamondbacks, I'm not even part of the organization. Diamondbacks acquired him this offseason from the White Sox in a Dominic Fletcher trade.
A
1-for-1 essentially. And stuff's good. He's only 20 years old, and he made his MLB debut already, and it was versus the Dodgers in LA. So welcome to the show, kid. Here you go. You're facing one of the best teams in baseball on the road. Have fun. Gives up 4 runs to start the game without getting an out, and then he kind of settles in. But his stuff, like I said, for Martinez is electric. The fastball's there. He's got a good breaking pitch. I think if both those pitchers can harness it, they could be a really good tandem in the Diamondbacks pitching staff for years to come.
Well, and yeah, I mean, them along with a number of other teams right now have had to call on these guys maybe sooner than they would ideally like to because of the epidemic of injuries. And that has been a storyline for the Diamondbacks and their starting rotation, which you expected to be one of the most competitive in baseball if they were healthy. So that kind of brings me to wrap things up today. Tell us what you expect from the Diamondbacks in the 2024 season in the second half here. They are deadlocked at 500 right now. Are they going to make a push for a playoff spot? And I guess what's the ideal scenario for them in the second half here?
So this is either glass half empty or glass half filled. I am an optimistic person, or at least I try to be. I think it's hard to say we won't make the playoffs pending or since that we made the World Series last year. Diamondbacks were in the World Series, 3 games away from winning a World Series. They're 500 right now, and it's quite impressive because their rotation has been decimated with injuries, as you hinted at. Erod has not pitched. He was given a 4-year, $80 million contract, has not pitched yet. Jordan Montgomery is not in baseball shape and now is on the IL with a knee injury. Merrill Kelly has been on the 60-day IL with a shoulder injury. It has been brutal in terms of pitching, and yet they're still a 500 ball club. Corbin Carroll has had one of the biggest regressions from 2023 and 2024, and yet this team has found a way to stay afloat in a National League where every team except maybe like the Rockies and Marlins are in it still. My expectation is / hope 85 wins. They won 84 last year. I think if everything goes right, the pitchers get back, they're healthy. Corbin has a bounce back. Christian Walker and Cattell have continued to have a great 2024. I think this team can do it again, especially the last 2 series. They've won 4 of the last 6 versus the Dodgers and Padres on the road. I'm in a much better mood than I was about a week ago. You know, the ship is getting right, and I hope they continue that path.
Isn't it funny how we're all like riding the tide with our team? But I mean, the Diamondbacks, you make such a great point that the Diamondbacks have been playing like so close to, if not truly at their floor for the majority of the season. And throughout the whole entirety of 162, you like to think that at least evens out a little bit. So I certainly hope so, because man, I was like, watch the Dodgers go spend all this money and then the Diamondbacks are still going to win the division. Like that's what I really wanted. But I will take them sneaking to the playoffs any way, shape, or form, because they've captured America's hearts last year. I feel like they're like America's team now, and
that'd be awesome.
We would love to see them continue to have success, especially with all the fun players that they have. So thanks so much for bringing us behind the curtain of a day in the life of a Diamondbacks fan here. Will you tell us where we can follow you on social media?
Yes, of course. First off, once again, thank you for having me. Awesome. Always talking baseball. Had a blast. You can follow me on Twitter, dfeely14, or my name, Dalton Feely. It's Feely. And then Instagram is just my name. So, and John Boy Media, talking baseball, Twitter, Instagram. That's where you can find us on socials.
Amazing. We will link all of that in the show notes too. But thank you again, Dalton, and enjoy the rest of the baseball season.
Thank you, Kelsey. You too.